two graphics cards, same year, completely different philosophies, and one of them is about to embarrass the other. But here's the twist, you don't know which one it is yet. This is the 3dfx Voodoo 2, and this is Nvidia's Riva TNT. It's 1998, things are heating up. It's GPU wars, and 81's going to come out alive. I'm Nick, welcome to Retro RTX. G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. So it's 1998, specifically March of 1998, and Voodoo 2 had just come out, released from 3dfx. It's carded 8 megabytes or 12 megabytes on board, depending on what you wanted, and capable of 800 by 600 resolution at high frame rates. The world hadn't seen anything like it. So we had the Voodoo graphics, which was capable of 640 by 480. And basically the Voodoo Rush was just the Voodoo graphics with 2D added on. So it was almost like the same sort of thing. However, the way the performance was, it wasn't quite as quick as the original Voodoo graphics. So now the new Voodoo 2 come out. Another add-in card, just like the original Voodoo graphics, no 2D built in. It was just another add-on card. So you could have, whatever card you wanted. You might have an S3 Trio if you really so inclined, or you could have something like a Matrox or anything along those lines. And the world was just amazed. Another card that supported Glide. It supported Direct 3D. Not so well, but people were happy with the performance. Anyway, fast forward to another few months, Nvidia had the Riva 128 at this stage, which was a little bit quicker than the Voodoo graphics, but it wasn't wowing anyone, and the Voodoo 2 destroyed it. So, but anyway, Nvidia released the latest chipset, the Riva TNT, capable of 2 textures in a single pass, provided that the game supported it, and clocked at 90 megahertz, just the same as the Voodoo 2. So the Voodoo 2 also supported dual texturing, or multi-texturing, depending how you want to put it. But the TNT was a good rival to the Voodoo 2. It didn't support Glide, however, it supported Direct 3D, and it also supported 32-bit color, something that the Voodoo 2 didn't support. And at the time, 3dfx didn't really care so much for it. They didn't really think too much about it because they thought fast frame rates is what people want, something that actually makes the game look appealing, which it does. Do not get me wrong. However, 32-bit color, it can be the difference between a good-looking game and a great-looking game, because you've got dithering. Also, too, using a pass-through method like they use on the cards, and basically you have your 2D card of choice. The Voodoo 2 slots in alongside it, and you've got a pass-through cable around the back, which basically your monitor plugs into the Voodoo 2, and this pass-through cable plugs into your original 2D card, so you can have windows and that sort of thing. And 3dfx, in my eyes, had underestimated what Nvidia was doing. And anyway, so like I said, both cards clocked at 90 megahertz. The TNT come out with 16 megabytes on board of VRAM, and it was also AGP support straight out the bag, whereas the Voodoo 2 still relied on PCI. Not that at this time it really made a big deal of difference, but the TNT was showing that the direction of which way the future was going to go. And in some ways, the 3dfx was still in the past, in that I was just doing brute force. And that can work, but only to a point. And what we're going to show now is, firstly, is brute force the way to go? We'll see that in the benchmarks. And also, too, we'll see that the TNT, it may not be the fastest, but what it does well. And also show the shortcomings of both graphics cards. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So this is the test system, complete with the Riva TNT already mounted I'll leave the specs below in the description for you. Okay, and right now, so we've covered the cards. We've got the Voodoo 2, obviously limited to 16-bit color. The Riva TNT, 32-bit color is an option with that card. So we're going to be looking at that. Also, too, how does it handle 8MB card with the Voodoo 2 versus the 16MB of the TNT? And also, we've got Glide and Direct 3D there also as a comparison. So without further ado, let's get into it. So now we're testing Raiders Incoming, running at 640 by 480. This game was released in 1998, so it's a perfect team up with the Voodoo 2 and also the TNT. You can see that the Voodoo 2 is putting in a really decent showing. We've got 118 maximum frames per second, but averaging 80 frames per second. Really using Glide to its full potential there. We've got the TNT averaging around 48, 49 frames per second. Interesting to note though that 32-bit color was actually faster than 16-bit color in this. So I actually reran the test and got the same results. So take it as you will, but you know, that's what it is. I do know the interesting thing to note too, the minimum frames per second on the Voodoo 2 is 38 versus 25 roughly on the TNT. So yeah, no, it did perform well. So pushing up the resolution up to 800 by 600, you can see the Voodoo 2 is still putting in a decent performance, averaging around 57 frames per second, but maxing out at 102. Even the minimum frames are still 28, nearly 29 frames a second. Glide's really doing a good job with the Voodoo 2 here. Same story can't be said for the TNT. Obviously that's through Direct 3D. This is a DirectX 6 game, but maximum frames per second on 32-bit color are 43 frames a second. Average around 35, and 16-bit color is 87 frames per second maxing out and averaging around 41 frames per second. So here we can see the tables turning Quake 2, so 640 by 480. Got the Voodoo 2 falling at 48 frames per second. The TNT pushing 69 in 16-bit color mode. We've also got 32-bit color mode here at 39.4, so completely playable in either resolution really. Interesting thing to note is that the Voodoo 2 is using the mini GL driver to make it work, and also we've got the TNT is using just your standard OpenGL. So yeah, we've got 800 by 600, got the Voodoo 2 doing 35 frames a second. The TNT 32-bit color is around 27.5, and we've got the TNT 16-bit color at 54.6. Either of them are all very playable. Maybe the 32-bit color is a little on the low side, but it's still playable. So interesting to note though too is that the Voodoo 2 on 16-bit color, obviously because it can't do the 32-bit color, it has got banding, and you can also see a bit of dithering in the image. So the image quality isn't quite there when it compares to the TNT in 32-bit color. Even 16-bit color, it's not quite there. So me personally, I would prefer the TNT in this game for visual quality, but also performance-wise, it is performing a bit better than the Voodoo 2. So I thought we'd push the resolution up a bit further to 1024 by 768, just because the TNT, clearly it's got the power to do it. The Voodoo 2, it probably would have the power if it actually had the RAM on the frame buffer to be able to do it. Anyway, so we've got the TNT in 16-bit color, still pushing 36.8, the 32-bit version, 19 frames a second, not really playable anymore. It's not really something I would play it anyway. But still, it's interesting to see what it could do. Image quality though, very good, just not quite playable enough to make it enjoyable. So switching over now to Unreal Time at 99, we've got the Voodoo 2 pulling a bit of a lead there, about 10% on 55 frames per second. Then we've got the TNT sitting on about 50. Both are in 16-bit color. Interesting to note though, I tried to get the TNT running in 32-bit color, and for some reason it just wouldn't run. So I've had to run all these benchmarks in 16-bit. I've got the Voodoo 2, it's running in glide, so no doubt that's probably where it's getting its performance advantage from. And the TNT clearly running in direct 3D. Switching it up now to 800 by 600, still 16-bit color. We've got the Voodoo 2's dropped off 51, so not much of a drop there, and the TNT sitting on about 49, which is nearly the same as what it was before, with the margin of error really. Pushing it up now to 1024 by 768. Clearly the Voodoo 2 can't support this, as I've mentioned it before, but the TNT though, still pulling 39 frames per second. It is a real shame that the Voodoo 2 doesn't have the RAM on board to actually run these resolutions. Me personally, I feel it's got the power on board to actually be able to do it, but for some reason 3dfx didn't include the extra RAM at the time. So switching it up now to 3D Mark 2000. This is run at 800 by 600. And I've run in both color modes just because the Riva TNT obviously supports the 32-bit mode. And you can see that both scores are nearly identical. We've got 1402 for 32-bit color mode on the TNT, where the 16-bit TNT is 1448. The Voodoo 2 is lagging behind a bit on 1037. 3D Mark 2000 is a direct 3D application, so there is no glide support here, so that would be the primary reason that the Voodoo 2 would be lagging behind. It doesn't really support direct 3D as well as the TNT does. The 8 meg on board definitely wouldn't be helping with it either. Okay, so that was the benchmarks of the Voodoo 2 and the TNT. As you can see in the benchmarks, the Voodoo 2 does lead for a lot of those benchmarks. However, very restricted to 800 by 600, especially in 1998. At this point in time, it's not really acceptable, is it? I've got the TNT falling at 1024 by 768 quite successfully, might I add, and doing it in a lot of games 32-bit color also. Whereas the Voodoo 2 limited obviously to 16-bit color, but also that resolution of 800 by 600. Unless you go and do SLI, which involves buying another Voodoo 2, then you do get the 1024 by 768, and you do get a decent boosting frame rate too. However, it does empty your wallet quite a fair bit, so it wasn't really successful when 3dfx actually did that. Another thing I'll add is that the Voodoo 2 does rely on Glide API quite a fair bit to get its performance, whereas obviously the TNT is using direct 3D. So the Voodoo 2 is capable of direct 3D, however, it doesn't really perform that well in direct 3D as opposed to TNT. Also, to note with the image quality of the Voodoo 2, I do notice a bit of dithering with the 16-bit color, whereas even though in 16-bit color on the TNT, the dithering was there, but it's not as noticeable. And also there was visible banding on the Voodoo 2. I can imagine that's brought about by obviously the second being a second card, so it's got a pass-through cable that makes it work in 3D mode because it's being a 3D only card. So me personally, if I was going to pick between the two, even back in the day, I'll still went with the TNT. The 2 didn't have additional RAM on board. Being limited to 800 by 600, if it did have additional RAM, I do believe it would have been able to actually go to 1024 by 768 and do that resolution successfully. However, the lack of RAM in the frame buffer restricted to that 800 by 600, as we've seen. So that's it, folks. Hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next video. And as always, my name is Nick, and that has been Retro to RTX.